Well, hi, guys. We are here with Steve Collis and Karis Shearer, and we're here to talk about a poem by Fred Waugh from this book, Isidore. Fred Waugh, W-A-H. And the poem is called Selves. I'll read it, and then somehow in 5 minutes we're going to talk about it. Here we go. Selves. Selves is a plural noun dormant within the outside, though it is not a pronoun, so when I chatter, we don't get colder. It tricks language into an intense recitation of I, we, I, we, I, we, as a way to keep warm around the pockmarked tongues of other selves. A translation of winter that comes after winter, left holding the math of multiple history. Just like Lorca's ghosts, the frogs of South America are wide awake. See, this is how difficult post-hibernation gets when plurality reveals its linguistic DNA, when the great vowels shift and all the pronouns splash into the pond like single green needles. Shiver under the perfect presence of after. That is a really great poem.
Yeah,
we won't
done.
get very far.
No.
What do you want to do with it? What is this? How can selves be plural? Karis, say the obvious.
I mean, I guess that we're constantly changing. They're iterative.
Multiple selves,
Multiple
selves in
selves.
different contexts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And why is that important to experimental poets like Fred? Why is it important not to have a single Frostian or Wordsworthian I?
Well, I don't know. I think because the poem is a mode of discovery. I think poets like Fred have no interest in simply conveying you something about their I, but maybe exploring what selves can be, mutable and changing, contextual.
So you ready for the $64,000 question?
Uh-oh.
Which you can only, this can only be done this early in a conversation when we're trying to do it in 5 minutes. What does the math of multiple history, what does multiple history have to do with this poetic assertion that the I is not singular? Oh boy. I mean, we know this, but it's hard to say quickly.
It's hard to say quickly. It's
Steve,
like a
you want
series
to
of
try?
lectures.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll just be reductive and simple, I suppose, which is like if we allow there are multiple selves, those selves are going to have multiple histories. They're going to be located in particular bodies, in particular moments and places and times, with particular experiences.
Exactly. This is why we're teachers. When forced, we can say something really complicated very simply. I mean,
Or bluff.
Which came first, the poet's decision, late mid-50s through the present, to say, I'm not going to be speaking from a stable subject position because it would be disrespectful to the multiple histories that we come from. Which comes first, the multiple histories or the decision to do this groovy thing about poetic selves, Karis?
But the self is also connected and constructed through language, right? And language, I love this line about linguistic DNA when the great vowels shift, right? Which is about that instability of even how we pronounce. I mean, I was thinking, how would I and we be pronounced before the great vowel shift? It would have been E and we.
Right.
I believe, right? And so even that is unstable.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
The poem's doing a lot of theoretical work, and poems can do theory, can't they?
Absolutely. Even the opening line where you just start separating, you stop and think about when he separates the noun of a self from the pronoun, maybe ourself, myself, yourself. But even right then, you sort of pause and stop and go, oh yeah, okay, I didn't think of it that way. But of course, self is a noun, and it's not the same thing as a pronoun. And you start thinking, at the same time, this is such a playful poem, right?
Well, certainly that first line is very playful. I mean, it's almost like some joke from Wittgenstein.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's think about it, okay? If the plural noun is dormant within the outside, but it's not a pronoun, so when I chatter, we don't get colder. I mean, we're not really talking about the merging of selves so that you feel what I feel. Kind of the opposite.
And yet the coldness becomes a theme, almost like a running gag or joke. Like, what does this really have to do with winter or coldness?
A translation of winter that comes after winter. Yeah. Don't you love that?
Exactly.
Translate that, though. I want to hear a paraphrase of that.
Oh, dear.
Can you do it?
A translation of winter
that comes after winter.
winter.
You don't really translate winter until you're a little warmer. Because who the hell wants to translate winter in winter?
Yeah, and does the change of season simply a translation of one temporal moment to another.
Yeah.
Another language, a language of spring following the language of winter.
Yeah, and then the cold continues in the last line, Karis. Can you do anything about that last line? Shiver under the perfect presence of after.
Well, I mean, I think, again, it's temporally, it's marking the temporality, right, of after. And it brings us back to like winter. Winter, the translation of winter that comes after winter. The orthography is the same, winter, winter, right? But it's evocative of the voice, right? That great vowel shift where orthography is the same, but the pronunciation is different.
Yeah. I'm also going to push back, Al, your desire to have us paraphrase in some ways.
Paraphrases of violence for this kind
Well, this poem, and again, like a lot of Fred's work, it's really resting on paradox, on things that you can't simply explain necessarily. But they just like sit there on the page and go, okay, well, here it is, and it's a fascinating object in language, but I don't quite sure what we can always do with it.
There's also a little pun in that last line too, right? This shiver under the perfect presence of after. Perfect presence of after. So there's temporality we talked about, but there's the present perfect reference there as well, right?
Nice. Yeah, okay.
Oh, that's good.
That is good.
Okay, we're up to final thoughts. Each one of us gets a final thought on this poem we could have talked about for an hour, but we're not. You just said something, so I'm assuming you're going to need a second to think of a final thought. Steve, your final thought?
I mean, I can't help but feel there's just little whispers of reference to other poems here. As you know, how poets are often writing with some of their poet's voice in their head. You know, I heard as soon as you get to winter, you think of Stevens, and a poem also. You know, that Mind of Winter, wonderful poem, The Snowman, exactly. And even with the wonderful part that Karis pointed out, the linguistic DNA, when the great vowels shift and all the pronouns splash into the pond. I think of that famous Basho.
It's totally Basho.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like Brie Noodles, though.
Yeah, but I know,
and
it's
so
cold.
playful. I don't know if there's still ice on that pond, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. So something like if there's referentiality, it just glimmers, it just flickers and disappears again.
I think Basho is in our linguistic DNA.
Yeah,
for
no
sure.
doubt.
Okay, so Karis Shearer, final thought.
This probably won't surprise you, but my final thought is about that tension between the text and the voice, and the way that the voice is such, the self, and the kind of embodied voice that brings a very specific pronunciation, a specific evocativeness to the language.
Yes. In a way, if I do chatter, you will get colder. I mean, there is. Okay, my final thought is, it tricks language into an intense recitation of I, we, I, we, I, we. You know, I feel kind of warmed by that. It tricks language. It being this method of poetry, this concept of plural selves, it tricks language into an intense recitation of I, we, as a way to keep warm.
Yeah.
I think I'm feeling a little warmed up by this poem.
Yeah.
Right, by all of the rubbing of I and we together to a couple of sticks to create a hedge against
a cold world.
Stevens forbidding, there is no subjectivity, and I have a mind of winter. Yeah. This is not a mind of winter.
No, it's not. It's resisting winter.
It really is. Thank you both. This was great.
Yeah,
thanks a lot.
If you liked this episode, watch another and subscribe.
And join us for ModPo, a free and open course at modpo.org.